I'm sure we've all had people in our life that at one point or another have told us that we should smile more. Now, whether that was because maybe it was a stranger that kind of felt uncomfortable or somebody we know that's like, you look more beautiful when you smile, something of the sort. I want to break down though today, first of all, why we're told to do this and also how it shows up in a safety setting. Should you be more friendly to people? Should you have a more neutral expression? When and where should you use these different ways of interacting with people? And just kind of breaking that down. So to start, why exactly do people say this? First and foremost, I think women are just very conditioned to be pleasant. You're conditioned to smile, to make people feel warm. And I think that people just kind of almost say that because they've been conditioned to, because if they see you, having RBF or something in public, they feel that you should be a little bit more friendly, which leads me to my next point. Sometimes when you have more neutral expressions or you aren't just overly smiley and friendly with people, it makes them feel uncomfortable. And a lot of times it's because they want to feel accepted or validated and feel like somebody's being friendly and warm towards them. So it's their own discomfort that they kind of project onto you. And last, people interpret this as you maybe being upset or you being rude to them. So they almost kind of feel offended by a lack of you making them feel that warmth and being kind towards them and like overly expressive. So it's their own defensiveness or them feeling like, oh, why is this person mad? What did I do to them kind of thing. So those are typically, I feel the biggest reasons that people tend to kind of make that comment. And there's others, of course, but first of all, I think understanding why they make the comment helps lead into really looking at this from a safety perspective. Now, I want to break down, first of all, the friendliness aspect. What exactly does that mean when you're looking at a stranger or how they might interact with you? Looking at this from the perspective of somebody else, this approach, somebody being friendly or overly charming, is actually a known tactic that perpetrators will use to gain access to you. If they can kind of get you to drop your guard a little bit, to drop some of those boundaries you might have, it helps give them access to you, whether that's just in a conversation, getting physically close to you. This is a tactic that has been used before. Complying with people also can increase your vulnerability. People are often looking for someone who maybe hesitates to say no, who they can easily engage with and kind of drops their boundaries for them because, again, it helps give them access to you. Women are also just socially conditioned to be nice, and that's no fault of our own. That's just kind of how we're brought up in this world. And because of that, it often can delay your ability to trust your instincts when things kind of feel off or uncomfortable, and it delays your ability to set different boundaries, which is why often in the classes that I teach, I encourage people to have non-negotiable emergencies, because when you're conditioned your whole life to be kind, to be pleasant, to not make people feel uncomfortable, to not set boundaries, first of all, it conditions you also to give them access to you, and often like unchecked access because we've been told that we should. But then setting those boundaries is really uncomfortable. And I often get asked, like, how do you start building confidence? And really one of the biggest things, first of all, knowing yourself, but also being willing to set those boundaries and having ways to do that. And often starting with just those non-negotiable emergencies, maybe little, yes, lies, I guess you could call them, but it helps you still stand up for what you know is right and trains you to keep trusting your gut instinct when things don't feel right, to stand up in that moment, even if there is a little fib. And that can help work your way up to having more direct confrontations. And still, you still might be in situations, even if you're really comfortable with direct confrontation, where that still doesn't feel comfortable. Maybe somebody's being extra pushy, or maybe you just, you kind of fear their physical response or something, or you don't want to escalate a situation where you can still use those non-negotiable emergencies. But again, we're often conditioned to be nice. It delays our ability to trust our instincts and then to set boundaries with people. And to kind of simplify this, being friendly to people is not the issue. You're allowed to still be kind to people, especially people that you know well. The problem mainly though is the access that it gives somebody to you if we are, that overly friendly and engaging with strangers that have the wrong intention. And it can also tell them that maybe you are more compliant, which makes you a more soft target because they feel maybe you wouldn't set those boundaries, and it allows them to get closer to you, whether that is mentally or physically. So understanding just kind of what does friendliness look like when it comes to safety, and remembering that most of the time you are most at risk around people whether that's somebody that's coming into your life, building a little bit of a rapport as an acquaintance, or maybe that's a romantic partner or a friend, a neighbor. But there are those strangers that also do look to get close to you. So just knowing, okay, when people say you should smile more, what does that mean for your safety? So now I want to break down, what do perpetrators actually look for? And I've talked about this before, more situationally, like if they're going to target somebody at random. But the first thing I want to talk about here is the compliance. People don't want to feel like you would reject maybe kind of what they're wanting you to do, because again, they may not even just be looking to randomly kidnap you. They could be looking to kind of get in close to you and then manipulate you to do things, or, have control over you. So if they feel like maybe there's going to be more compliance, it could make you more of a soft target in multiple different situations. As always, being distracted, being uncertain of things, not really asserting yourself and standing up for yourself, and being by yourself. Those are all things that people often are going to look for. And again, that could be somebody looking to randomly kidnap you, which is a rare situation, or somebody just like looking to come up and strike conversation with you at a bar, right? Getting close to you, trying to have conversation. They see that you're by yourself. Maybe, they've started conversation, like, okay, now she's engaging in conversation, so I can keep going, and they're trying to get closer to you. So those are typically the things that they look for that might make you appear as a soft target. So again, when we understand that, we understand what being friendly can come across as to them. It just gives us a little bit more information on how we show up when especially you're by yourself, to also protect yourself. And one little caveat I do want to add here is that having confidence, even just slight signals of confidence, that could be body language, that could be the way you portray yourself, your ability to maybe even banter with somebody if they're asking a question that feels uncomfortable. That doesn't mean that you can't engage with them, but just having little signals of confidence can be a deterrent to them. And that's one thing when I travel, even when I go into a gas station, I still will say hi to people. That doesn't mean I'm inviting conversation, because I don't show them that with my body language. If somebody's trying to ask me a question or talk to me at the airport, I don't sit there and show them with my body language that I want to engage in conversation. It might be a quick interaction, but I'm not sitting there to have a full-blown conversation. And if they start asking me things I don't feel comfortable with, and again, I really think through like those questions that we've talked about before, like, are they trying to figure out when you're isolated, or your patterns, your history, those kinds of questions, I always try to redirect the conversation. And a lot of times I just use like casual banter as a way to do that. And I watch those responses. And that casual redirection tells them that you are confident. You know where your boundaries lie. You dismiss yourself to the bathroom. That shows that you're confident. You know where that boundary is. And indirectly, they pick up on that, even if it's not like an overt confrontation that you're having with them. So looking to portray confidence in other ways, that does not mean that you cannot engage with people, that you can't have casual conversation, and that you can't be friendly. There are people that are also just naturally have a friendly demeanor and smile at people, ask how they are in passing, but that's where that body language and those subtle cues of confidence do come into play. Now, to go over the pros and cons of being friendly. So how could this positively help you when it comes to safety? First of all, in safe environments, this helps build rapport and relationships with people. Being friendly, being warm, it makes people like you when you're engaged in them. You want to ask them questions. It does make people typically like you more when you are more engaging. So it does help build connections, but that's in safe environments also. It also can de-escalate. Maybe this is like a customer service situation. Or even, sometimes with people drinking and stuff, if they're being really aggressive, sometimes taking the more, friendly, calm approach can help in those situations where the other person's not continuing to get escalated. Often if you match it or exceed it, they're going to continue to escalate. So sometimes trying to remain calm, remaining, I guess you could say more friendly, can help de-escalate certain situations. And it can increase just like your overall likability and social support that you might have from people, especially in like group settings. You're going out with a group, or just in college and wherever. I mean, even at work, having that likability can help get you back up in situations where you might feel uncomfortable. Now, the potential cons, this could appear to make you as a soft target, where people might use the foot in the door technique that we've talked about before, where they start with kind of one little thing to get their foot in the door with you, then they keep progressing, and each of those advances feels more and more uncomfortable to say no to, because it shows maybe you are more willing to be open, giving them access to you, and more compliant if they're asking for little things or making smaller advances. It also sometimes it's harder to disengage when there is social friction, when you're not, as assertive as a person, it can be hard if you do feel uncomfortable to have those confrontations, which is again why we use those non-negotiable emergencies, so you can still set those boundaries if you are uncomfortable with something. And then on the flip side of that, the pros of having more of like a neutral, standoffish demeanor, and especially more so with strangers, this can help because it first of all, it tells them that your boundaries right up front. They know that you also tend to appear a little bit more confident sometimes. And it tells them that they're probably not able to make advances as easily. Come in and like ask you questions that lead to more questions. They can kind of get you trapped in that social situation or conversation that you may not want to be in. But there are certain environments where, and this is more if you're more combative as opposed to just kind of like neutral and standoffish or like, confidently assertive, but being more combative sometimes can escalate situations. Again, depending on who it is, what the environment is, it could potentially escalate it. And, as always, somebody might perceive you as rude or whatever it is. But I know for me, when I'm out traveling, I prefer to have RBF. I have a very neutral, standoffish approach. I may, give a soft smile to people that like hold the door open for me and say thank you, but I'm not sitting there like overly friendly trying to have conversation or show that maybe I would be interested in any kind of conversation. And just in a more like in a safe setting, obviously like you may not have as many positive social interactions if you are more standoffish, but that just might also be your comfort level. Neither of these things is right or wrong, being friendly or being more standoffish, but it is important to understand, if there is somebody with bad intentions, how does this show up? If you feel uncomfortable, if you're in a new setting, you have to kind of look at what kind of environment am I in and what's going to best serve me. If I am somebody who's naturally really friendly and I like to have conversation with people, but I'm traveling by myself and I'm stopping at gas stations in the middle of nowhere, or I'm checking into a hotel and there's people in the lobby that are trying to talk to me and I'm by myself, maybe I do, you can still be yourself, but you just show with your body language that you're not interested. You have those other ways to cue that you do have the confidence and can be more assertive if you need to. If you are somebody that's a little bit more standoffish and maybe in safer environments where there's people trying to converse with you and stuff, like maybe you do try to have the more friendly smile, more approach or whatever you want to call it, because, it's a networking event and you know that it's a safe place to do those things. So it's, again, not to say that one is better over the other, but know what perpetrators look for. If you are in situations that do feel more high risk, understand maybe kind of how you can show up best in that situation to prioritize your safety. If it's a safe environment, looking at what your objectives are, but also just acknowledge who you are as a person. That's not to say that you need to change who you are. You can be kind and have boundaries, but often, making sure that you're as safe as possible can require both in different settings. So knowing when to use those things and having skills that feel comfortable for you. You can be friendly, but have those non-negotiable excuses. Know when you need to show with your body language that you're not interested in engaging with someone. That's something that I tell a lot of people, because there are people that are more naturally inclined to be warmer, to want to have conversation with people. And you should always do that. Like, you're sitting next to somebody on the plane. If you're somebody, I actually just had a plane ride recently where there were these two ladies and they talked. I mean, it was a 6 a.m. flight. I was like, how the fuck are you guys having a full conversation? We did a 2.5-hour flight. They chatted the entire way. Every time I'd kind of like wake up, they were still chatting. Like, I mean, it was crazy. And I mean, they were sharing very personal details about themselves, but it's not to say that you can't still have conversation. You just want to be mindful, especially when alone, of who and how you're sharing that information. And in situations where maybe you can tell somebody is trying to push up against your boundaries, letting them know directly or indirectly that you're not interested, that you do have those boundaries. So I encourage you to live your life, have fun, and just have a simple plan so you have an exit route if you need it. And for those people that are telling you that you should smile more, tell them to fuck off. This in no way means that you need to listen to them and be more friendly at all whatsoever. But I think that it's really interesting to kind of understand where that comes from and how that does show up in a safety setting, in a setting where maybe you are by yourself and you have that stranger that randomly says that to you. What exactly does that mean? What does it look like when it comes to engaging with strangers or people that start off as a stranger that could become, your perpetrator? So I hope that this was a helpful episode. This is a question I actually get asked a lot in my self-defense classes. Like, so does this mean I shouldn't talk to people? How do I talk to people? Do I need to not be friendly? Should I not ask them questions? how, somebody is trying to talk to me, how do I get away from it? And especially with people in every one of my classes, they also ask people, raise your hand if you tend to feel uncomfortable with confrontation. And nearly every room in the hand goes up. I do work with a lot of college students, but this is true for a lot of people. Confrontation is not a comfortable thing, especially for women, because we do grow up with that conditioning of you should smile more, you should be friendly, you should be inviting. And basically they're telling you like you shouldn't have boundaries. And I think that that's something a lot of people feel. That's why we have this innate fear of being disliked. And we're social beings. We don't like to be disliked. We don't like when people view us negatively. We like to be viewed in a positive light, which does tend to make us feel like we have to be more compliant when we don't feel comfortable. And that's where I get a lot also on like social media posts and stuff, and even in some of my classes. Well, like knows a full sentence. And it's like, well, yes, of course, like always. And I know in Crime Junkie, they use this saying, be rude, stay weird, stay alive, or something like that. Or be rude, be weird, stay alive. And it is that you are allowed to do those things and to assert yourself and assert your boundaries. But the reality is a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that. So how do we navigate still setting boundaries when that doesn't feel comfortable or like an option? And I would sooner maybe, and I've been in these situations, you'd sooner, just go along with things that don't make you feel comfortable than have to have that confrontation. So again, I hope this was helpful. If you know somebody in your life that's been told this before, or somebody that maybe does feel like, oh my gosh, is being friendly a bad thing? Or what do I do if I'm a more friendly person? How do I still set boundaries? What are perpetrators looking for? Or that person that's been told that, if they are more kind of just have like a neutral disposition, that they need to be more friendly. Hey, that can actually help you in a safety setting. So please make sure that you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast and future episodes. If you have any questions, comments, things you want to see in the future, we do have the link in the show notes, so you can go submit anything you want to. And I do always try to keep up to date with those submissions. And that's where sometimes a lot, like these podcast episodes, come from, a lot of those questions too. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening, and I will chat with you again next week.